Since March 15, the United States has been crushing Yemen's Houthi militia with devastating airstrikes that have sent many in the group into hiding. Now it's about to get much worse, as the US airstrikes are on the verge of igniting a ground war that could destroy the militant group forever. We're starting to see the US strategy unfold. After its aerial blitz has forced the Houthis into disarray, forces on the ground are preparing to retake territory Yemen lost to the Houthis years ago. The militants are in disarray, and their downfall may be about to come at the hands of militias that stand opposed to the Houthi ideals. On April 14, the Wall Street Journal unveiled the basic US plan. It claimed that militias on the ground in Yemen are preparing to launch full offensives against the Houthis, potentially with American backing. Such offensives are being made possible because the US has been pelting the Houthis with airstrikes since March 15. Those strikes have been devastating. According to Yemen's Ministry of Health, which is controlled by the Houthis, the US aerial assault has resulted in the deaths of at least 123 people, with 247 more being injured. The ministry claims that the US has targeted civilians with its strikes, wiping out entire families in the process, in addition to destroying military sites and killing soldiers. However, some of these claims should be taken with a grain of salt. This information comes directly from the Houthis and contains no details about any of the key members of the group the US has killed. The militants are clearly being as vague as possible with their numbers to create the impression that the US is bombing civilian targets rather than taking out the members of the organization. The opposite appears to be true. No discussions about a ground campaign could take place if the US strikes weren't hurting the Houthis. That ground operation is currently being considered by several factions inside Yemen that smell an opportunity. With the Houthis weakened, they believe they have a chance to oust the group from at least some parts of the Red Sea coast that the Houthis have controlled for more than 10 years. That could be a key starting point for a revolution. The Houthis have controlled much of Yemen's northwest for years, including the country's capital of Sana'a. That city is home to about 70% of Yemen's population, meaning control of it essentially amounts to control over the entire country. Still, the Houthis have predominantly limited their presence to Yemen's northwest, which is their power base, while using their influence to exert control over the rest of the country. So, a ground campaign is being planned. Does that mean the US is preparing to put boots on the ground in Yemen? No. Instead, the Wall Street Journal says that several private American security contractors are already working alongside the militias as they plan their uprising. And it's not just the US getting involved. Those militias are also being supported by the United Arab Emirates, or the UAE, which shouldn't come as a surprise. The Houthis have targeted the UAE with drone and missile attacks several times since they consolidated their power in Yemen. For instance, 2022 saw the UAE get struck with several attacks. These attacks included an attempted ballistic missile strike on January 24, with the UAE reporting it destroyed a pair of missiles fired at Abu Dhabi. The UAE intercepted another Houthi missile on January 31, along with 3 drones out of a group of 4 on February 2nd. It was the UAE that raised the possibility of supporting a ground campaign against the Houthis, says the Wall Street Journal. Right now, the US is open to supporting those plans as long as they're carried out by local forces and require no direct US military involvement. However, a decision hasn't been made yet. The US isn't leading the talks for this ground operation, leaving the UAE to spearhead things. So, it's possible that the US won't be involved at all beyond what some of the country's private contractors are doing. National Security Council spokesman Brian Hughes didn't shed much more light on how the US will contribute to the plan. Ultimately, security in the Red Sea is the responsibility of our partners in the region, he claimed, and we're working closely with them to ensure shipping in those waterways remains safe and open far into the future. There's no mention of a ground campaign, but that won't matter. Yemen's militias are gearing up to strike, which leads to an obvious question. Who are these militias? The Wall Street Journal doesn't provide any specific details. However, it's possible to speculate, based on the factions present in Yemen right now that oppose the Houthis and their efforts to control the country. The Yemen Conflict Observatory, or YCO, says there are several resistance forces in Yemen, which are typically self-organized militias that were first created to prevent the Houthis from completing their southward advance in 2014 and 2015. Those militias were successful in keeping the Houthis in Yemen's northwest, with the Southern Resistance, or SR, and Popular Resistance, or PR, being among the most important of these groups. Neither group is guaranteed to want to restore Yemen's deposed government, claims the YCO. SR is a secessionist movement that has also clashed with Yemen's internationally recognized government on several occasions, making them a potential wildcard if they're called upon for a ground operation. While they will fight against the Houthis, it seems likely that SR would want to install its own people in the country's government if it's victorious. PR is an even more complicated prospect. The YCO says the militia encompasses a wider and more diverse array of actors, including tribal groups, political organizations such as the Islamist Islah Party, religious sects, and civil society. In other words, it's a mishmash militia that is large enough to operate throughout Yemen, but has so many influences within its ranks that its members may be divided on everything except one thing: the need to eradicate the Houthis. It's unknown how many members of these groups are active, though the YCO says they've caused a lot of trouble for the Houthis and Yemen's deposed government over the last few years. Between April 2nd, 2022 and April 4th, 2025, these two groups took part in one battle, caused 9 instances of remote violence or explosions, and spurred 26 riots against the Houthis. They're also not above violence against civilians who support the Houthis, with 35 instances of such events having taken place over the last 3 years. There are other groups too. Watan notes that the UAE has spent several years carving out strategic influence within Yemen by supporting and even militarizing groups to stand against the Houthis. Much like with SR and PR, this militarization isn't necessarily in support of the deposed Yemeni government. For instance, the UAE has supported the Salafi movement inside Yemen for several years. Previously, the Salafis were a peaceful group made up of preachers. It had no militant arm until the Houthi uprising and the UAE's combined attempts with Saudi Arabia to drive the Houthis away from their borders. Now known as the Salafi Brigades, the group has become an armed force that Watan notes makes it a key player in Yemen's complex internal landscape. It's these types of groups that were supposed to help Yemen form a legitimate national army to fight against the Houthis. However, the assassination of Major General Saif al-Yafei in February 2017 put paid to those plans. Since then, Watan claims Yemen's militant factions have become entangled, laying the groundwork for the UAE to impose its vision on their direction and actions. This entanglement has resulted in militias like the Salafis and the Giants Brigades growing stronger through mass recruitment. Almost everyone wanted to fight the Houthi militia, so recruitment was opened on a large scale, says journalist Wada Atta. Many battalions joined this movement, integrating into what became known as the Tihama Resistant Brigades and the Elite Military Brigades, both prepared by the UAE, similar to what it did in Aden, Shabwa and Hadramaut. Why does all of this matter? It shows that there is no single militia that's going to wage a ground war against the Houthis. The groups are scattered all over the country, with the key task being to unite them behind the cause of taking out the militants currently infesting Yemen's capital. The UAE intends to be the mediator between these groups, with or without US support, allowing them to organize into a singular fighting force. That leads to the details of the plan as they stand so far. The Wall Street Journal claims that militias in the south of Yemen are going to join up and deploy their forces along the Houthi-controlled coast of West Yemen. Their goal will be simple: seize the crucial Red Sea port of Hodeidah. The retaking of Hodeidah has been attempted before. The Houthis have controlled the port since 2015, with the summer of 2018 seeing the Arab coalition, which included the UAE and Saudi Arabia, attempt to break the group's control. Forces from both countries were joined by members of several Yemeni factions, much like what's being discussed right now, to create a fighting force of around 2,000 people. They failed, and in doing so, they left control of a key port in Houthi hands. At the time, the United Nations said the Hodeidah received around 80% of Yemen's imports, including food and aid provided to its civilians. By the time the coalition launched its attacks, it had become the only source of aid and goods into Yemen thanks to a Saudi blockade of Yemen's ground borders and airspace. The port is vital to most of Yemen's population. Around 66% of its 28 million people require aid flowing through Hodeidah and into the rest of the country to survive. Oh, and Hodeidah also happens to be the port through which the Houthis receive their weapons and supplies from Iran. The Houthis have been so successful in Yemen because they're supported by the Iranian government. Iran claims otherwise, but it's clear to most observers that Iran uses the Houthis as a proxy that enables it to exert its influence in key territories and cause chaos that opens the door for Iran to capitalize. According to the Council on Foreign Relations, or CFR, Iran started supporting the Houthis in 2009 when the group launched its first war against Yemen's government. That support intensified in 2024, which is when the CFR says most experts agree that Iran started sending missiles and rockets to the militant group. That increased support was a turning point for the Houthis, as it allowed them to capture Sana'a and hold off the Arab coalition attempts designed to expel them from the territory they occupied. The CFR says the relationship between Iran and the Houthis is extensive. Iran provides the group with weapons, as mentioned earlier, but it also offers other forms of security assistance, such as providing intelligence to the group and delivering training to its militants. Aid packages intended for the Houthis regularly flow into Hodeidah. For instance, January 2024 saw the US intercept a ship carrying missile warheads, drone parts, and anti-tank missiles into the port. There's only one group that would be receiving those weapons: the Houthis. Iran isn't helping the Houthis out of the kindness of its heart. By supporting the group, Iran can exert influence in Yemen, which in turn allows it to present threats to Saudi Arabia and the UAE. This growing influence was highlighted when Iran appointed Hassan Irlu, who's an officer in Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, as its ambassador to Sana'a in 2020. That was no ambassadorship for Yemen. It was Iran installing one of its military officers in the Houthi-controlled Yemeni capital. By becoming such an active partner to the Houthis, Iran has managed to cause millions of dollars of losses for Saudi Arabia and the UAE at minimal cost to itself, according to the Middle East Council on Global Affairs. It's also been able to use the Houthis to support its geopolitical ambition elsewhere, most obviously in supporting the group in carrying out attacks in the Red Sea that the Houthis claims are responses to Israel's war against Hamas in Gaza. Hodeidah is the key to this support. By taking the city, the factions uniting in Yemen right now will control everything that flows into the country. That means they'll be able to maintain a vital lifeline for much of Yemen's people. However, it also means the factions could cut off supplies to the Houthis, leaving them with dwindling supplies of missiles and equipment. Take Hodeidah and you defeat the Houthis, assuming the ground operation into the port city is successful. The Wall Street Journal says the United Militias would then focus on pushing the Houthis away from Yemen's coast, potentially isolating them in a smaller region of Yemen's north that could allow the factions, with support from the UAE, to surround the militants and eradicate them. And it's all been made possible by the US airstrikes in Yemen. Still, that leads to an important question. Why is this happening now? A large part of the reason is that the Houthis are weaker now than they've been at any point over the last decade or so. The US's strategy of overwhelming the group with airstrikes to decapitate the Houthi leadership appears to be working. Though there's no confirmation from the group itself, the Long War Journal says the US may have managed to take out more than 100 Houthis of various military ranks between March 15 and April 6. More may have followed in the days since, given that the US has maintained daily airstrikes in Yemen. Of course, 100 losses in a group believed to number 20,000 may not sound like it means much. However, it's the people the US is targeting with its strikes that matter. They include Colonel Abdul Nasser al Kamali, who was killed on April 8 in an airstrike. Al Kamali was the Houthis' head of intelligence, meaning he played a key role in organizing the group's ground forces and its attacks in the Red Sea. His loss, along with the rest of his second-in-command for supposedly leaking secrets to the US, places the Houthis in an intelligence black hole. The US also claims to have killed the Houthis leading Militia, along with several other members of its leadership. That's the point of the decapitation strategy. By taking out these Houthi leaders, the US has left the rank-and-file soldiers in the group struggling to find direction. Many are going into hiding until the Houthis can formulate a response, assuming a response is even possible. An opening has been created, unlike in 2018 when Yemen's opposing factions failed to retake Hodeidah against a Houthi force running at full strength. This coming ground operation is being conducted at a time when the Houthis are in disarray. There may not be a better time to launch an assault. Plus, the factions may feel like they're being pushed to act now. Why? The US is looking for a way out of its airstrike campaign. That's according to the Wall Street Journal, which points out that the US sending a second aircraft carrier into the Red Sea has a key purpose. The country wants to deliver the final blows to the Houthi leadership via more intense strikes, giving it a way to withdraw quickly. As the journal points out, discussions about a ground operation are happening because US President Donald Trump's administration is eager to demonstrate its commitment to limited campaigns and avoid endless wars. This harkens back to Brian Hughes' comments about how the US is ready to support local players in the next stage of the assault on the Houthis. The US may believe it's done all of the damage it can with its airstrikes. Now it's time to withdraw and leave the various militias that have been waiting for a chance to strike at the Houthis to do their work. Unfortunately for the US, it may not be as simple as that for several reasons. For one, a ground operation in Yemen risks reigniting the civil war that allowed the Houthis to rise to power in the first place. That war is believed to have caused more than 377,000 deaths up to 2022, with 60% of those deaths happening due to a lack of access to food, safe water, and healthcare in the country. The war also killed 11,000 children and may have been partially to blame for a massive cholera outbreak that's affected 2.5 million people since 2016. It's inaccurate to say that Yemen is peaceful right now under Houthi rule, but a new ground operation designed to displace the group, in addition to the US airstrikes, risks plunging Yemen back into a deeper crisis that could result in the deaths of thousands more of its civilians. Furthermore, the US has to consider the mechanics of the entire operation. It already knows that Saudi Arabia won't be taking part in any sort of coalition fighting against the Houthis this time around. Officials from the country, which the Wall Street Journal says is a chief patron of Yemen's government, have already told US officials they don't want to get involved. Saudi Arabia has its reasons. Like the UAE, it was rocked by missile and drone attacks the first time it tried to intervene in Yemen. It doesn't want to go through that again, meaning the factions preparing to take on the Houthis have lost a key ally, at least in terms of direct military support. The US also has to consider its involvement in this ground operation carefully from the perspective of its ongoing talks with Iran over the latter's nuclear weapons program. Those talks were already difficult to start, with Iran not wanting to deal with the US directly. Instead, Oman served as a mediator for the first round of indirect talks, with the second round due to take place in Italy on April 19. Given Iran's links to the Houthis, the US may be wary of destabilizing those talks at a crucial juncture. It'll continue its airstrikes for now, those had already started, and the US may try to use them as leverage, along with proof that it'll follow through on its threats to bomb Iran as well. However, getting directly involved in any sort of ground campaign against the Houthis is a different form of warfare, and one that may make Iran more likely to want to build a nuclear deterrent rather than negotiate. Finally, there's the big unanswered question to consider. If the militias preparing to fight against the Houthis are successful, what comes next? After all, it doesn't seem like many of these militias support the deposed Yemeni government. Some are being influenced by the UAE, while others have their own agendas. Therein lies the biggest problem for the Yemeni people. Those groups may join to take out the Houthis, but when that common enemy is gone, are they going to turn on each other to spark a renewed civil war over who gets control of Yemen? Only time will tell. For now, let us know in the comments section what you think about the emerging ground operation to take out the Houthis. How involved will the US be? Can Yemen's various militias put aside their differences to take out a common threat? And what will all of this mean for Yemen and Iran if the militias are successful? Share your opinions below. And remember to subscribe to The Military Show for the latest news about the evolving Yemen crisis. We're an independent source of news and information for military affairs around the globe and greatly appreciate your support.